4 says, posted this interview between Dr. Jared Ball and Dr. Butch Ware on the relation of Western Africa, Senegal in particular, to Islam, where being Muslim himself has an interesting take on history, on that history. So this takes us to Instagram, and this takes us to YouTube. Let me just line this up real quick. Africa and Islam. This takes us to YouTube. This video is called Africa and Islam, featuring Dr. Butch Ware. By the way, you'll notice I'm playing a little Afro beats in between. Make sure you guys give me a thumbs up or a fire emoji or something in the chat for little Afro beats in between. What we're gonna do, we're gonna watch this video and then we'll comment on it.
So I'll go backwards. When I was doing my PhD at Penn, and I completed that degree in 2004, it was still a time where you really couldn't get trained in Africa and diaspora history at the same time in a history department. So I had to battle to get that profile that you discussed. So my primary fields was in Africa, pre-colonial African history, African American history, really not the early period, but really since 1865. So modern African American history was my focus, and Islamic intellectual history, because I wanted to bring the study of African Islam into dialogue with the Black studies tradition and with the Islamic studies tradition. So the piece that I sent is from my first book, The Walking Quran: Islamic Education, Embodied Knowledge, and History in West Africa. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in the African diaspora communities about the role of Islam historically, especially in West African societies. So a lot of people don't know that Africa is the only continent that has a Muslim majority, that there are more Black Muslims in sub-Saharan Africa than there are in North Africa by a factor of 2, and that West Africa specifically was not incorporated into the lands of Islam through any kind of external military conquest. Our ancestors adopted Islam as a system of religious meaning and social organization voluntarily in a period where they were in positions of power. So the chapter that I had you guys read is that after the slave trade rises and begins to decimate West African societies, it was only natural that Muslim communities and Muslim scholars would become focal points for resisting this evil. And so the chapter that you guys read was about the way that Muslim scholars led anti-slavery revolutionary movements. And it actually goes back to the 1500s, but the kind of big piece of the story is an anti-slavery revolution in the Senegal River Valley that is the first modern republic to abolish the institution of slavery and the slave trade, abolishes monarchy, and does this as all part of a kind of critique of mercantile capitalism and slave trade and slavery as being of a piece. And it draws on no Western European Enlightenment traditions. These are jet black West African Muslims calling on their own histories and their own religious and social traditions within Islam to develop the most radical revolutionary anti-imperialist movement of the period. And it funnels directly into the Haitian Revolution, which is much more widely known. It has channels that have flowed into resistance movements all throughout the diaspora. And I'll just say this, is the book that I'm working to try to finish now before all of this politics has gotten in the way, really expands out from that chapter that I sent you guys. It's a book called The First Atlantic Revolution, Islam, Abolition, and Republic Before 1776. And that is so that people can understand that our ancestors didn't just start fighting against this tradition of enslavement and imperialism when we were sold into bondage in the New World. We was fighting it in Africa on the basis of, African historical experience, and in contradistinction to what some of the Hoteps think about Islam. Like, Islam was not an external colonizing tradition in this place. Islam was a radical revolutionary tradition in this place.
Geechee, do you want to jump in? Because that is definitely something I want to ask about at some point. But Geechee, let me.
Well, I mean, I guess I wanted to even stay there in terms of because there's this conversation around liberation theology and yeah, I'm curious to hear more about how you determine and or conclude that the utility of Islam, and I'm not saying that you're even saying this, is more liberatory or more in line with African revolutionary spirit. I'm just curious to hear you
Yeah.
run with that.
I mean, Professor, Cone, great, Black liberation, theologian, thinking through largely the Christian tradition. I definitely want my work, to be a point of engagement for people to see that there is a Black Muslim theological tradition of resistance as well. And you see it very early on. There's a series of papal bulls that are written in the 15 teens and 1520s, where they're trying to stop the importation of Muslims from West Africa into New Spain, into what's now Mexico. And people forget, that there's a good little African substrate, beneath that Mexican, population, because of those, 500,000, enslaved people that were brought to New Spain in the 16th century. But they were trying to stop Muslims from being imported because Muslims were so closely associated with slave rebellions, that the kind of ethic of justice, and also the organizational capacity, the fact that traditions of Muslim scholarship allowed Muslims to plan out slave rebellions and revolutions in writing. It allowed them to communicate with one another across ethnic and linguistic boundaries, whether you were Mandinka or Fulani, or Wolof. If you might not be able to speak the same language, but you could write the same language so that you could plan. So early on, the Spanish and the Pope identified Muslims as particularly dangerous rebels. And part of the argument that I've made in other places in my work is that Islam has served as a vehicle for expressing kind of revolutionary solidarity, both because of the way that it articulates certain kinds of principles of resistance to oppression, but also just because of the simple organizing capacity that it allowed. It allowed Africans to build bonds that transcended their own ethno-linguistic or national boundaries. And so they were often at the cutting edge. Now, we obviously know that it wasn't only Muslims that resisted, right? We know that Africans, drew on their own ancestral and spiritual traditions of organizing and of spirituality wherever they came from. But it's just that Arabic literacy and Islam provided a particular, a particularly effective framing of that resistance, both in continental Africa and in slave rebellions and uprisings in the diaspora.
So
Yeah, kind of. I agree with some of y'all. I kind of figured there was some nonsense going to come out of this. But I'd like to hear you guys in the chat and on the panel, a few of us that are here, give your thoughts to the nonsense that's being spewed. Real quick, Trigger Ivy 262 says, I knew you was about to get on bullshit, LOL. I hear when Black Muslims do this because they are very slick. They don't talk about the fact that Islam came to North Africa by the sword. He goes on to say, when it came by the sword in North Africa, inner African nations can't do trade easily when they practice their own culture versus Muslim-controlled North Africa. It's geopolitical why they took it on. Lastly, Trigapi says, Black Muslims are slick and liars because they make it seem like they took on Islam by divine faith and by Islam being so much better than their own African culture. Shit makes me sick. That's Trigger Happy in the chat. The prompt says, hold on, did I miss it? The prompt says, posting his interview between Dr. Jared Ball and Dr. Butch Ware on the relation of Western Africa, Senegal in particular, to Islam. Ware, being Muslim himself, has an interesting take on that history. Let me start with Brother Anthony on this one. Anthony, I know you call bullshit on this. What do you say to the whole thing?
Man, in the words of the great white American general, Norman Schwarzkopf, that is a bunch of bull van vivacity. You know what I'm saying? That's a bunch of bullshit, man. And I said, hey, Koku, when I seen it was on Dr. Jerry Ball's show, I already knew some bullshit was coming. You know what I'm saying? I already knew some bullshit was coming. But it was that show because that show that, don't get me wrong, that's an intelligent brother, man. I'm not taking none of weight. He's a sharp brother, intelligent brother, but you know, he got a lot of bullshit with him. You know, and everybody who he has on his show got bullshit with him. So I knew it was some bullshit coming. You know, and I figured that brother Ware, Mr. Ware, I knew he was probably a Muslim. But that is just so it just I could punch holes in all of that. Like somebody, I think was it Trigger Happy said, you know, that Islam came to Africa with the sword into North Africa. You know, it came with the sword. I mean, that's the way Islam was always spread. Now, when you get we got two things. Two areas here. We got Islam as it spread to East Africa. You got Islam as it spread to West Africa. Now, in East Africa, it came with the sword. You know, the Arabs in Egypt was trying to conquer inner Africa, the Sudan, for a long time. You know, they was trying to conquer the Sudan. You know, the Sudan, they had these Christian kingdoms that these Africans who had converted to Christianity, you know, like in the 5th century. You know, in these kingdoms, you had the kingdoms of I'm trying to get the kingdom of Nobatia. You had the kingdom of Alodia, and you had the kingdom of Makuria. These three powerful, these Nubian kingdoms. Okay, well, they had been at war with the Arabs, with the Arab Muslims in Egypt for hundreds of years. I mean, it was in I think it was like in one of the most famous battles in all of Africa's history, man, was the battle in which the Muslim Sultan Saladin sent one of his generals down to conquer the kingdom of Makuria. At this time, Makuria had basically taken over all of the land that used to be the ancient Kushite Empire. No, it was like it was the successor state to the Kushite Empire. And so he sent a force down about 20,000 to try to take it. You know, and they slaughtered them. Those Nubians slaughtered those Arabs. And it was the first defeat of the Arab Empire. You know, they had been, since they had started, they came out of the Arabian Peninsula and began to spread Islam everywhere. It was their first defeat was at the hand of some black Africans. Okay, so if for hundreds of years after that, you know, you also had the thing, I think we talked before about the Bach Treaty and everything. Well, I mean, all of that, you know, it was a military conflict in East Africa. Now, in West Africa, it was a different thing because the West Africa had all of these kingdoms. You know, it had all these powerful kingdoms where their rulers. It was a trade thing. Now, you know, you had the markets on the coast of North Africa that had access to which traded with Europe. Well, the Africans wanted to trade with Europe. They wanted to expand their trade. So a lot of African leaders like Gonga Musa, also known Mansa Musa of Mali, and then Sonny Ali or Songhai, and a lot of the earlier leaders of Kenem Burnu, all of the great empires of West Africa, they pretended to be Muslims. They weren't Muslims. Sonny Ali was known as a witch doctor, you know, but they said he was a Muslim. You know, the Songhai Empire was an Islamic empire, but Sonny Ali was a witch. He was a traditionalist, and Mansa Musa was a traditionalist. Now, Mansa Musa played the game, and he went on the pilgrimage and everything. But in reality, he actually was not a Muslim. Well, he may have become one later, like a nominal Muslim, but he actually was a traditionalist. You see, a lot of the African leaders pretended to be Muslims for trade purposes. And so over time, you know, Islam did spread that way. So he was right on that part about Islam spreading not with the sword. You know, as far as at least the relationship between the Arabs, you know, and the Africans. But what happened when the sword came into play was when you started getting some of these African leaders who had converted to Islam, and it became, you know, like Dr. Clark say, we out Pope the Pope, and we out Muhammad. You had these guys like Omar, what is his name? It was one named Usman Dan Fodio. in northern Nigeria, in the region that they know known as Hausa land. And there was this other one, El Haji Omar, who was another Islamic holy man. He was one of these puritanical guys, and they waged holy war all over West Africa. You know what I'm saying? And they was killing other Africans. I mean, it was basically either you're gonna be a Muslim or you're gonna die. You know what I'm saying? So they had these African holy men who was going out, and those two right there did so much to spread Islam over West Africa. You know what I'm saying? And it was others too. Later on, you had Samari Touré, you know, who's I think supposed to be the grandfather of Sekou Touré. Well, he was a fundamental Muslim. You know what I'm saying? And not only did he kill a lot of other Africans who didn't convert, he also was engaged in their slave trading too. And see, that's one thing that a lot that they leave out about these Black African Muslim leaders in West Africa. They was heavily involved in slave trading. You know what I'm saying? You had to enter the Nilo-Saharan corridor, which was a major slave trade that went from north to beyond the Sahara in Africa across the Sahara and into the markets of North Africa and into Europe, in which they spread across Asia. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of those Muslim African leaders was heavily into that. I mean, heavily into that slave trading. And that's a lot of stuff that they be leaving out. But when they get to talking about all of these, how they were the people who was behind all of the anti-colonialism and anti-slavery, man, that is a bunch of bull crap. Yeah, okay, yeah, you had some who was in that. I'm not gonna say no Muslim rulers or Muslim leaders didn't fight against slave trade. Yeah. Some of them did. Some of them did. A lot of them probably did. But I know more of them engaged in slave trading than not. Than fought against it. You know what I'm saying? And that's the story you could read all over West Africa. And he's talking about in the diaspora when they crossed the ocean, how they was the leaders. No, man, the majority, the leaders of the Haitian Revolution was not a bunch of Muslims. I mean, that don't mean you didn't have some in it, but they were not Muslims. They would talk about voodoo. You know what I'm saying? You can go to the Africans in South America in different places. You know, Gaspar Younger in Mexico and Bincos Bios in Colombia. You know, those dudes, they had embraced Christianity. It was an Africanized Christianity. You know, and then a lot of those brothers and sisters was into the African traditional religion, which was the largest thing that we use. You know, our ancestral beliefs. You know, because that's really what the white folks were scared of. That's why they always try to ban it. But you know, man, he coming from being a Muslim, and you know he want to put the Muslim thing, you know, in the forefront. You know, I mean, we're getting props. Yeah, y'all did some things. You know, you had the Malay Rebellion in Brazil in 1835, you know, which was led by some Mandinka Muslim men and Bambara Muslim men. Yeah, you had that. They did that. They contributed, but don't try to make it like y'all was the forefront, the leaders of it. You know what I'm saying? Don't do that, man. You know, that's why I knew it was gonna be some bullshit anytime you get it, because they had that same mindset. You know, it's really an anti-black thing. You know, because they think they Muslims, but what they are is they Arabists, like Dr. Clark say. You become an Arabist. Just like when you're a Christian, you become a Europeanist. And what's the first thing you attack? You attack that old African ancestral spirit, the African traditions. No, we ain't none of that no more. That witchcraft, that all that old mumbo jumbo, all that there. We civilized now. You know, just like the white man ice cola, the Arab man ice cola too. You know what I'm saying? You got to go change your hand to Muhammad this. You know what I'm saying? You got to bow towards Mecca and all this old foolishness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like Dr. Clark was right. You know, you become an Arabist. Yeah, man. I'm gonna leave it right there, man, because that just make me so sick when I hear this shit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, man, fuck it, man.
No, Anthony, you always have the floor to expand on your thoughts for sure. But what you said is absolutely correct. In fact, the chat kind of agrees with you. Trigavi 262 plus says Black Muslims are deceptive, nothing new. Sister Raw says all them religions come out of war and conquest. See? Real Black Gentleman says, the literacy helped us. The literacy of Muslims is what helped us. We were illiterate before the Quran. Like he says, get the fuck out of here. Trigger says, yep, I've noticed a lot of black leftists are Muslims too, or they take defense of Islam a lot because of Arabs. RBG says, didn't the Moors attack West Africa too? Trigger Happy says, this is what you are going to have to deal with if you want a re-Africanization process. You're going to deal with black Muslims and Christian propagandists who are very prepared.
Cool.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Hey, no, I would, somebody just said something. Was it RBG? He needed to come on and expound on that and tell the truth about how the Songhai Empire fell, the Battle of Tundibi in 1591, when the Moors, the Moors who all running around here wearing these fezzes, talking about they Moors, when the Moors joined with the Queen of England in an alliance. The Queen of England sold them the cannons. And a white man named Judah Pasha, who was the commander, a white Jew from Spain, was the commander in the battle which they destroyed the Songhai Empire. You know what I'm saying? I mean, listen to him talk about that now. You know what I'm saying? About what they Muslim Moor brothers did. No, talk about that now.
RBG, the invite has been extended, not that it had to. You're always welcome to come up here and speak your piece. We're in the last hour of the show anyway, so come on up if you have time to. Trigger Happy says, yep, exactly what I meant, Anthony. People don't understand that even in the ancient world, you're also concerned with trying to be big and international in trade. He said, also, watch out. We got a topic on Mansa Musa. I looked at that topic today, actually. We'll bring it next week. He said we have a topic on Mansa Musa as well when it comes to the African mode of production. Yeah, so with all that said, Bonnie, you've heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to this?
Yeah, this goes back to what I originally said about the Bolton guy, the Islamic scholar, these Islamic thinkers. So now you have a black butler, Islamic butler, carrying water for Mecca, and they have a paternalistic view towards black people and black culture. So he frames it. Here's how he frames it. He opens the statement saying how the the Muslims were so revolutionary in terms of fighting against the British, blah blah blah, and how revolutionary this, and they had the institutions or whatever. And I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute. So the black people didn't become revolutionary or had a revolutionary thought until the Muslims came there. Until the Muslims come there. So they just was waiting around for Muslim instruction, Islamic instruction, before they say, hey, we need to fight against the British and the West. How are we gonna do it? Oh, we're gonna use Islam to do it. It's so phony. Any person under the sound of my voice, whenever you hear this kind of rhetoric, ask the Islamicist or Arabic scholar when they talk about Africa, ask them who's Tippo Tibbs. Ask them who Tippo Tibbs is. Just ask them who he is and see how they answer that question. If they don't know who he is, you could stop the discussion. But ask them how revolutionary Tippo Tibbs was in Zanzibar. Ask him about him. This is a fantasy notion, a revisioning Africa and how these people see. And I understand he have a spiritual attachment. Africa never had a problem with different religions in it. Africa have many different religions. And if Islam wanted to come in, Islam would have just been another religion in Africa. But that's not what Islam wanted to do. Islam wanted to take over like the Christians. They wanted their religion to be the prominent religion, and all other religions should be expelled. The same thing with the Christianity and the Catholics. So this guy tries to reimagine what Islam did in Africa to suggest that, but he did, to his credit, he did say, well, I'm not saying that the Africans didn't have any kind of traditional beliefs and they did their part. However, here's what the Islamists did. It's a joke. It's funny to me. It's hilarious. And I say, the Islamists and their butlers and their black butlers, they come with these narratives as if the black man in Africa don't have original thought in his head and can't think for himself. He has no agency until someone from the outside brings something in to enlighten him on how he should run and govern his world around him. And I find it to be insulting. It's insulting. And the other fella, I forget his name now. I don't know what kind of scholar he is, but I wanted him to ask him who Tipu Tibbs was and see how he handled that question when he talked about revolution, the revolutionary spirit of the Islamicists or Black Islamicists inside of Africa. As Anthony said, absolutely sure you had people who fought against the British and did things within Africa, to the benefit of Africans. But the Africans was fighting against the Islamicists as well. They wanted to maintain their traditional beliefs and culture. Why shouldn't they have to? So they was fighting against the Arabs, just like is fighting against Rome. But this is never be a part of this discussion. But I think as a scholar, the brother should ask them essential questions. Because we want the African man wanted to keep his religion too. So we fighting you and we fighting them. How about that? Never discuss. But I don't want to rant. I'll leave it there.
No, ranting is fine, Buana. It's only me, you, and Anthony at this point. So ranting is fine. But in the chat, Trigger says, LOL, Buana. They will dance around that too. They are good at dancing. They will always deflect and say they were enslavers who are also traditionalists. That's why you have to provide another argument. He goes on to say the problem with Africa is we have too much variety and division. We need unity. We can say whatever we want, but Islam and Christianity has a degree of unity, and we need unity. Goes on to say again, this is why I hate when Black people say, quote, stop talking about Kemet so much. Our scholars are smarter. They're trying to find a unifying point of our authentic culture so we can discard Abrahamic religions. RBG's in the chat, he agrees with Trigger. Lastly, Trigger says, imagine that instead of Arabic, we use either Swahili or revive Medjugorje and I don't know this one, RN and Kemet, what the language of Kemet was called. Okay. Imagine we use those languages instead of Arabic. Man, that's a lot of stuff being said in the chat between RBG and Trigger Happy 262 Plus in particular. Guys on the panel, do you guys have any last thoughts on the chat and this topic in general?
I would let Anthony educate the people about who, because people may not know who he is. I would let Anthony educate the people on who Tipu Tibbs was and how revolutionary he was.
Yeah, the revolutionary Tipu Tibbs, the black man from East Africa who was responsible for the murder, rape, and pillaging of hundreds of thousands of Africans, of black people in Africa, and selling them into slavery into Oman, into the so-called in the Middle East, in India, and everywhere, man. Yeah, that man was a devil, man. Tipu Tibbs was a devil. I mean, he would probably get my ranking as probably the worst African of all time. You know what I'm saying? Because that man was a pure devil, man. And he was responsible for the misery of hundreds of thousands of Africans, if not even millions. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, him and working with his Arab Muslim brothers in Oman and in the Arabian Peninsula, they caused so much destruction, so much. I'm not just talking about on the island of Zanzibar or off the coast of Kenya somewhere. I mean, they conducted trade. He conducted an international trade. I mean, a continental-wide trade into East Africa, man, and into Central Africa, into the Congo, where they had ivory, gold, and everything, but their main thing was human beings, man. African men, women, and children. And trafficking them all over the South Asia and all over the Middle East and all over this area, man. And all of the horror and things that they had to go through, and he had no problem doing it. He didn't give a damn because you know what? Guess what? His revolutionary Islam came out. These was pagans. These was Kafirs. They was Kafirs. You know, Kafirs mean, you know, what the Arab word for what they call Africans, unbelievers, infidels. You know what I'm saying? So he had no problem doing it. You know, I mean, he did it happily with a smile on his face, man. No, he's one of the worst bastards that ever lived, man. As it concerns African people, Tipu Till. Yeah, you know, I like to see the professor over there talking about him.
Thank you for that, Anthony. In the chat, Trigger Happy 26, Real Black Gentleman says, look up The Fall of the Congo Arabs. It's a great read. I will write that down right now. The Fall of the Congo Arabs. This is one of the things I want to start doing around Shoot the Breeze, where we bring up books and literary references, and you know, we actively go ahead and look those up. I don't know if that's a book or an article, but I'm definitely writing it down. The Fall of the Congo Arabs. I will read that for sure. Trigger Happy 262 Plus says, also, another argument that we have to watch out for is the idea that Arabs were also black. But if anything, this makes even more of an argument as to why we can develop our own culture. He says the Middle East is a zone of confluence. There were black people, but also white people from Iran and Central Asia. They leave that part out too. Trigger Happy has a good point. If you could bring up a prompt and with an attachment on that, we could discuss that a little further in the future. I know it's 10:53, but if you guys in the panel will allow, I'd like to post Shoot the Breeze topic number 5, only because I want to clean the slate so that next week we can get to some of the newer topics you guys posted. If that's okay with you guys, can I post Shoot the Breeze topic number 5?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Shoot the Breeze topic number 5. It's a short video, but it's an important kind of conversation, I find. And I think you guys might find it interesting as well. Shoot the Breeze